Hello Fearless Gamers, Matt here for Fearless Games, and today we're going to finally go over the 2010 Compendium. I know a lot of people were more interested in the Compendium than the regular rules, so we're finally going to get underway with that. And the reason that it took me so long to post this video is primarily because I then discovered that the Compendium really wasn't an alteration to the primary rules. They did add a lot of new rules and new army setups for the individual units, but those more affect just the armies themselves and didn't really have an impact on the rules themselves. And my personal feeling is it's better to just go over the general rules, because once you have an understanding of those, the army races rules kind of make more sense and are easier to incorporate without any help. And plus, this would take forever if I was going over every single race and all the different rules and all that other stuff. So for those who don't know what the 2010 Compendium is, the creators of Battlefleet Gothic, who, from my understanding, don't work for Games Workshop anymore, but are still highly regarded, and usually if they introduce something, Games Workshop has a higher probability of accepting what they wrote. So they wrote the Battlefleet Gothic rules, and then in 2010, when Games Workshop updated the rules on their website, they then made a compendium to go along with it. This compendium clarified a lot of the rules. If you really look at the Games Workshop original rule books, they were very plain when it came to the rules. They're like, you do this and this happens. But they weren't really breaking down the rules to give you a good understanding of them. So they made the compendium to basically break down the rules so you have more clarity and clarification of what's going on, and then added a couple of things to the races and altered a couple of the rules themselves. This was created after partnering and looking at all the Battlefleet Gothic magazines and all this other magazine franchise that their name escapes me right now, which added on to Battlefleet Gothic after Games Workshop in essence stopped supporting it. So they took all of those things and compiled the 2010 Compendium. So we're going to go over the rule changes and a couple of the rule clarifications that I felt that I may not have said clearly in my original rule set. If there's a general question that you really have and I haven't gone over it at all, leave a comment and I'll probably comment back to you. If a question gets enough likes, because a lot of people tend to feel that question is also the question they'd like to know, and I notice, 3 or 4 questions have a couple of likes on them, I will do a video response that addresses those particular questions. So leave a comment if you have a question for the rule sets. And so, as stated, this is to go in tangent with the rules on the Warhammer 40,000, the Games Workshop website, so we'll post a link to the Games Workshop rules and a link to the 2010 Compendium. And like I said, we're not going to go over the races, and we're not going to go over the FAQ or the errata and stuff like that. We're only going to go over, well, technically the errata. We're going over the general rules, clarification, and alterations that they did. This is 18 pages out of the 101 or 112 pages that the 2010 Compendium makes up. And let's go and start off. The first and foremost that we're going to go over is leadership and orders. First thing to note is that special orders are done per ship during the movement phase. The order is issued, the leadership is rolled, that ship is moved, then you move on to the next ship. So this way, you don't have to worry about, okay, I did orders for him, but did I move him? No, it's you pick a ship, give him his orders, roll the leadership, move the ship forward, go to the next one. And also, the other thing that they wish to clarify is that a ship or defense can only have one special order issued at any given time, unless otherwise noted in the rules, like the Remecy Starfort, which is allowed to have up to 4 special orders applied to it at any given time. And under no circumstances can a leadership exceed 10. No matter what crazy bonuses or modifiers or special characters, no matter what happens, any roll of a 12 or 11 automatically is a failure, regardless if your leadership is like 13 or 14. 10 is the limit. You can never go higher than 10. On the flip side, any ship whose leadership is 1 automatically fails leadership tests. Well, I'm sorry, my correction. They are not allowed to take special orders. They need to have a combination of modifiers and negatives that bring them to a leadership of 2 in order to take special orders. This is so there's still that chance of success, and it's just a greater chance of failure. Now, when rolling special orders, a decision to use a free command check, such as with the elite command crew or when orcs use all-ahead full special orders, must be done before special orders are failed. So, if you've got 3 ships, and you have 1 that needs to roll for special orders, but 2 that have a special rule that says they get to automatically pass a check for a specific order, those auto passes have to be done before the special order on the other ship fails. So if you do the one ship that has to roll his orders first and he fails, those auto pass special orders then cannot be issued. So it's usually best to issue the orders on the ships that auto pass first and then roll for the ones that need to roll second. A capital ship squadron always rolls special orders or leadership tests together, benefiting from the leadership of the highest leadership of any surviving vessel in the squadron, even if crippled. So, when they're all part of a squadron, they roll the highest leadership for special orders. So, that's all they really clarified in the general orders, in the general leadership tasks. Now, so let's move on to special orders. In the case of all ahead full, ships in a squadron all go the same plus number of d6 centimeters forward. You don't have to roll for them individually, they all get the same dice. Distance all ahead full orders, unless they use less dice, are slowed down by celestial phenomena, being crippled, etc. If a squadron with multiple d6 values when all full takes this special order, the ships that take less d6 use the highest rolled dice in its move. So say the standard is usually 3d6. Say if one ship only gets to use 2d6. Then you roll, so then you roll the 3d6 and you take the 2 highest of that roll, and that's the one they get, and you just ignore the lowest roll. If it's one that only gets 1 dice roll, which would be very odd, then he only gets the highest roll out of the 3 and everyone else gets the total. Now, when reloading ordnance, they've gotten rid of the running out of ordnance rule. This has been replaced with just they just don't get ordnance that turn. So you never run out of ordnance. I'm on the fence on that one. I don't like it on the sheer fact that, well, it was kind of realistic because not all ships prepare for long engagements, and thus they may run out of missiles, or they've been in so many, you don't know how many battles they were in before, they may not have enough missiles left. But on the flip side, I can see how it works because, like, the army I gave the Stark Lord is very torpedo heavy. And if that runs out of ordnance, then his army is screwed over because they can't, they don't have any weapons left. And the weapons they do have, they just don't have enough to match up against the firepower of the other army. Or fleet, if you prefer. So, moving on, they also altered Brace for Impact, or clarified. Brace for Impact happens anytime the ship is going to take damage, but before rolls to hit are made. So what they're saying here is that you can't, if you know a ship is getting attacked, you have to roll for Brace for Impact before the attack is rolled. You can't wait to see if it rolls, if it hits, and then go, no, because that is in essence not fair. So anytime the damage is anytime the ship has the potential of taking damage, you roll for the Brace for Impact order before the roll to hit is done. Now, in all cases, Brace for Impact replaces whatever special order the ship or squadron may currently be on. However, the special order previously given stays in effect. So if their special order was reload ordnance, and then they do brace for impact, they still have the benefit of reload ordnance, they still have the benefit of all ahead full, they still have the benefit of lock on, they just now are under brace for impact. And ships and squadrons still cannot, ships and squadrons still cannot take special orders in the next turn. So if you do this in the enemy's turn, while you're under brace for, while you were under all ahead full, and then you roll brace for impact, you then can't take a special order in the next turn because you count it as being brace for impact. Now, a decision to brace for impact must be made before any attempt to shoot or rolling dice is done. They just again reaffirm that it has to be done before you know if you're got hit or not. In essence, this is to represent that ship is targeting us, brace for impact, not that ship hit us, quick, brace for impact on the explosion that just happened. You know, it's kind of like that in sense. If you really watch in, like, a good example is Star Trek, they always say brace for impact before they're hit. So, and in this game, the representation of being hit is not knowing the person's going to hit, because at that point, it's already happened. And as we know, the guys that don't brace, those that don't hold on to the handrail, flip over. Because their reaction was done after the hit was declared as being struck. Now, that's all they did for orders and leadership. Now, movement. One thing to note on movement is minimum distance is 5 centimeters. If you don't move 5 centimeters under either burn retros or in high orbit, you're stationary. You're a defensive, you count as defensive for that turn. You can't move half a centimeter or 1 centimeter and count as being moving. It's 5 centimeters is the minimum that you can do if you want to count as moving. Now, a cruiser that moves straight ahead at least 10 centimeters without turning in a movement phase cannot count that movement to immediately turn in the next movement phase. So all turns, their requirement for movement has to be done in the same turn. So you can't go, okay, he moved 15 centimeters last turn, so I get to turn now because he did his minimum move. It's always done during the same turn. Then let's see, the next setup that they talk about, that was pretty much the biggest thing that they emphasize with the movement. They then talk about overlapping bases and such, and that's more, when it comes with overlapping bases, it's just basically, if, you know, the ships across, they can overlap, but then, you know, they count as touching, and different effects happen to them. Which is something that it can either be used on your own personal opinion. If you want me to go over it, you know, just ask and I'll go over it in a FAQ video. But I didn't feel that it really was a necessary thing to come up with, because usually most of the time, I've never seen a situation where players were overlapping their base stands and such. I always see them connecting or, you know, moving them out in just a way. But let's see. Escorts can be stacked to follow movement of battleships, and it's basically, you know, you can place, if worst case scenario, you can stack them on top of them, and certain effects can happen to them. Which they don't really go over, like, you know, this happens or this happens, you know, it just clarifies if you can target one ship or the other and stuff like that. Now, now we move on to shooting. Shooting is, escort squadrons that have their total firepower halved when on special orders that affects weapon fire strength and firepower together, not individually. Capital ships squadrons have their firepowers halved individually, because capital ships can survive on their own, so their firepowers can be fired separately from the rest of the squadron, whereas squadrons tend to be firing at the same group, so you only have them after you accumulate their whole firepower together. Excuse me, and escorts do not have their weapon strength halved solely because the squadron is crippled, reduced to half its starting number. So, if you have 10 escorts and you drop down to 5, they don't count as they're crippled, but they don't have their firepower because of that. Because the ships individually are not crippled. Now, using the gunnery table, if a ship or squadron has multiple weapon types that rely on the gunnery table, such as bombardment cannons, heavy guns, standard weapon batteries, they can fire all those simultaneously at once. This is to avoid firing one weapon battery, then firing another, and getting the penalties for blast markers being in the way. So in essence, you go, okay, if a Space Marine battle barge, you could say, I'm firing my weapon batteries and my bombardment cannons at the same time. This way, both of them get the table as if there's no blast markers. They treat blast markers as not being there, because they're both firing at the same time, so their blast markers would appear at the same time. What you would do is you would total each weapon group individually, roll them separately, and then apply blast markers as normal. So the benefit to this is the fact that you can avoid blast markers by firing them simultaneously, not one after the other. Let's see, no target aspect or modifier adjusts shooting, and according to the gunning table, no target aspect or modifier adjusts shooting beyond the far left or far right columns on the gunnery table. So you always have, so your maximum is the far right and the far left of the screen, of the table. That you can never go beyond that, no matter how far away or how high up it goes. If you count weapon batteries as closing, no matter what, like with the Eldar, you still use the defense table for firing against defenses. You can't get around that one. And if a combination of ships in a squadron has a firepower value greater than 20, what you do is you take that, you break away the excess and combine it separately. So, if you have, say, a total of 32 weapon battery firepower, you would then break it into 20 and 12. Look up 20 with the stats and all that factored in. Look up 12, apply all the stats factors in, and then combine those two numbers together to determine how many dice you roll. This is to make it a little bit easier and avoid, people not questioning everyone's math as to what the numbers are beyond 20. Now, splitting fire. You cannot split weapon battery or lance fire of any type at a single target. I don't know what they really mean by that. I guess they're figuring you can't split the weapon battery fire, go, okay, I'm going to fire at this once, and then I'm going to fire at it again just in case it's not dead. I think that's what they're going off of. You can't just sit there and go, oh, I'm going to fire a couple of shots and see if it blows up, and then I'm going to fire the rest to blow it up even more. So the only way you can really do it is to split fire and fire at different targets. That's still allowed, but you can't split fire on a different target itself. A ship electing to fire at ordnance does not have to make a leadership check to ignore closer ship targets, nor does it have to make a leadership check to ignore enemy ordnance if it's the closest target. It must still make a leadership check to split its fire between ordnance targets, just as it would have to split fire normally. I don't recall if I said you need to make a leadership check to split your fire of a weapon battery, but according to this rules, apparently you do. If you've got, say, argument's sake, lance battery power 4, if you want to shoot 2 at one ship and 2 at another, the way that the Compendium is reading this out, you have to roll a leadership to fire them at separate targets. At least that's what I'm getting from this rule talk, from the way they're saying it here. They're saying that you need to roll leadership to split your gunnery weapon fire, which is odd because I don't think they say that in the book, but they kind of say that that it does say it in the book. Now, blast markers and damage. A ship in base contact with a blast marker means the whole base is affected. It counts as being in contact all around it and in every arc for purposes of leadership, movement, shooting, ordnance attacks, being boarded, or every other respect where blast markers are in effect. This includes if it ends its movement in combat with a blast marker for any reason. A vessel is considered to be moving through a blast marker even if it's moving away from the blast marker it is in contact with at the beginning of the movement phase. So if the blast marker is behind you and you're moving away from it, you still apply the effects of the blast marker. If ordnance are coming into contact with the ship base, then it counts as, then it has to roll for blast markers. Gunnery tables are affected by it. It's really weird. It makes it sound like the entire ship base becomes a blast marker, but it doesn't. If another ship comes in contact with them, they are not touching the blast marker, so they still are, they still don't have to suffer the penalty. It basically is just saying that no matter what direction anything happens to that ship, that blast marker still applies. Parts of me say, okay, makes it a little bit easier. Parts of me say, I don't really like that, because if the explosion is behind you, that shouldn't affect things being shot at you at the front. But that's what they're saying in this rule set here. If a ship moves into base contact with another ship that already has a blast marker, but the blast marker doesn't touch its own base, it does not count as having a blast marker in contact as well. In other words, the ship in contact with the blast marker does not in and of itself count as being a blast marker for the purposes of being in base contact with other ships. Ordnance markers treat it as a blast marker, other ships don't treat the ship as a blast marker. Okay, so now they also mention when ships have stacked or overlapping bases, there's no limitation to the number of shields of the ship's shields a blast marker can take down if one of them is in contact with a blast marker. A ship overlapping a ship in contact with a blast marker also counts as being in contact with it. So if you happen to have two ships and their bases are touching each other, and the blast marker is touching one of them, they're both counting as their base stands are overlapping. So their shields are on top of each other at that point, and the blast marker is affecting them. But it doesn't affect the following ship. So let's just say, for example, we have ship 1 has a blast marker touching it. Ship 2, his base stand is overlapping ship 1. Ship 2 now has lost a shield because the blast marker is touching ship 1, whose base he's overlaying. Now ship 3 comes in and overlays on ship 2's blast stand. That ship is not affected by the ship 1's blast marker because it's touching ship 2, and technically ship 2 doesn't have the blast marker in contact with him. But if ship 2 has a blast marker solely touching his base stand, then ship 3 is affected. So, now, crippled battleships. Being crippled have shields, turrets, ordnance, all weapons, and effects boarding. This effect is cumulative if the ship is braced. So if the ship is crippled, it halves all its stats. If the ship then braced for impact, it halves its stats again. So if it's originally 8, becomes a 4 for being crippled, becomes a 2 for being braced for impact. Excuse me. Nova cannons, it can be fired per ship normally, as opposed to all at once in the beginning of the shooting phase. So originally it was you had to fire all of them at once, now you can fire them all together, all individually as you see fit. It also states that's no longer a guess weapon, but that was changed in the Games Workshop rules. It doesn't say it's a guess weapon anymore, unless you have the Big Blue Book. The Big Blue Book still says it's a guess weapon. And then it goes over the same rules as per normal with how to fire it. And the Nova Cannon is a line-of-sight weapon and cannot fire through obstacles or celestial phenomena that act as normal line-of-sight obstacles, such as planets, moons, asteroid fields, etc. If desired, however, you can nonetheless fire at the obstacle, and if a roll to hit on the scatter die is rolled, you then place a number of blast markers touching the edge of the phenomena that you're shooting at. So you can't shoot through, but if you know a ship is going to have to move through it, you can shoot at it and place a bunch of blast markers there to give them a bit of trouble. Nova cannons are unaffected in any way by the lock-on or reload ordnance special orders. And so that was all they did for shooting. Now let's talk about area effects and special weapons. They talk about basically area effect weapons are not blocked by line of sight because they hit everything in the area. And so you can't like duck behind an asteroid if the explosion, think of it like Independence Day where the flames just, covered everything in its path no matter what was in front of it. The only way that the one girl survived was she got out of its path. Exterminatus vessels, used in scenarios that require them to normally replace their standard prow weapon with an exterminatus one. Vessels that do not normally have prow weapons, like the Vengeance Grand Cruiser, cannot be used as an exterminatus vessel. Okay, and that is all for right now. We're going to break this into 2 videos, hopefully not a third one. So if you have any questions, leave a comment. If someone's asked your question already, like it, and if I get a bunch of likes on certain questions, I'll post a video response answering those questions. And if not, I'll probably post a comment and answer the question that way. So let's continue on with the next step. So that's all for right now. So until next time, Fearless Gamers, take care.